Hey guys, how's it going? On this week's video, I'll be breaking down the squat. Now, in previous weeks, I've already broken down foot supination, how to acquire adductors, how to acquire hamstrings, how to set your rib position, how to breathe in various positions. So I'm not actually going to be going over all of those things here because I've already gone over them. Bilateral drills are taking the ideas that we've refined in unilateral exercises and simply applying them to weighting both feet. So there's nothing new under the sun in terms of there's no new way that we're gonna have to strategize and figure out how to deal with gravity in a bilateral exercise. My deadlift video should have been a clearer example of that. But what I wanna do is I wanna point out certain things that others may not point out because that's kind of my, where I fit in this industry. I kind of poke holes at things that are long established or that people have just regurgitated for decades without really taking a closer examination for how stuff is working together. So I do not coach people to push the knees out. I do not coach people to extend or arch their back or stick out their chest or get a rib flare. I'm not looking for any of those things. I want to maintain all of the reference centers that I've talked about before. So heels, hamstrings, adductors, foot supination, obliques. And that's pretty much it. If you have those things, you're gonna feel challenged even if you go through a body weight variation of this drill. So without further ado, here you go. So from the front, a squat's gonna look like this. You're gonna have your feet about hip width apart. Press the balls of your feet down into the ground. AB duct that first metatarsal. Feel the back of the feet also AB duct. So now you're getting ankles that are externally rotating. Posteriorly tilt the pelvis. Okay. So once you have all of those things set in place, exhale to feel your ribs drop. You're going to feel obliques and descend. Being mindful of not losing this sensation. Oh, there we go. Keep going down. Notice I'm not pushing my knees out. They're not caving in either per se, but I'm not actively trying to push the knees out. Once again. The big thing that I'm trying to maintain is obliques, hamstrings, and pressure on the heels. At the very bottom, you guys can't see this, but my abs are lining up to maintain this orientation. Ball of feet pressing down, AB ducting the first metatarsal, pressure on the heels, posteriorly tilt the pelvis, exhale to set. And at the bottom, you should really feel your obliques kicking in to maintain that position, to keep you from extending. So at the very bottom, you're going to want to do this. Resist that urge, and push the ground away. Once you start to add external load, things change slightly, just in terms of how easy it will be to maintain all those reference centers. My preferred method of loading this mechanic is through a goblet squat or a back squat. I don't particularly care for front squats because it's a lot harder for me to get rib and pelvis orientation. Front squats leave a lot of people actually extended. They think they're neutral, but if you look at the relationship of the ribs and the pelvis, it will leave a lot of people extended. And I've seen people try to jam their neck back, so that causes issues at the cervical spine as well. Balls of the feet, supination, exhale. So a few things to consider on this breakdown. Once again, I didn't go over all the minutia of foot supination, getting adductors, getting hamstrings, and then the exhale, because all those things I've covered before. I just wanted to give you a more macro piece of the puzzle as to how I approach squatting. As you can see, in the bodyweight squat, it was a lot harder for me to reference myself and to get into that bottom position. With an external load, it's easier for me to offset the weight distribution so that I can maintain heels and hamstrings and all that jazz. All right. So the external load is oftentimes going to make certain things easier, but that doesn't mean that you should neglect training your body weight squat. And I wanted to give you guys an idea of where I'm at with my own body weight squat. If you're having issues, if you feel like you're shifting, if you feel like your knee is going into valgus collapse, please, for the love of God, stop going after external rotation, stop going after glute max, stop trying to open up your hips. That stuff is only going to make things worse in the long run. You might feel better in the short term, but it's just a band-aid. What you can do and what you should actually try to do if you're feeling a little off on your squats or on your deadlifts, pretty much any bilateral exercise that you're doing, work on unilateral stuff first. So if you're finding that your squat, your deadlift isn't really too clean, go back to your single leg hinge, go back to your single leg split squat or lunge with a valve slide, and work on getting a lot more internal rotation, feeling your adductors, feeling your heels. If you clean up your unilateral lifts and you get more somatosensory input from your environment, your squats and your deadlifts will automatically clean up. You don't need to go and do tons of banded exercise movements. You don't need to work on core strength. You don't need to work on a lot of these things. You simply need to be able to load stance on a right leg and a left leg appropriately. Because you can still load a right leg, but it won't necessarily be in stance. So stance is the configuration that I'm looking for when I talk to people about their single leg deadlifts or their lunges. I want you to feel foot supination, pressure on the heels, pressure on the ball of your foot, adductors, hamstrings, like all that stuff that I always talk about. I'm actually teaching you guys stance on that individual leg, all right? So you can stand and you can put weight on a leg, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your leg is in stance. Stance is the ideal position for your leg and for the bones in your leg to be able to handle and manage load and gravity. So you can load a leg, but it might not be in stance, and that's really what we're looking for. So now you're in a bilateral stance exercise, so you need to be able to manage these things on both legs. So if you're shifting or if your knee is collapsing or something's going on, it means that you are inefficiently managing stance on that leg or the other one. Generally, it's going to be a right side that you're wanting to tackle first. So make sure you clean up your right side single leg hinge or split squat before tackling the left. I've had issues where I just couldn't get deep enough on my squat or on my deadlift, and I just did 2 or 3 reps really slow, really controlled of a single leg hinge on my right leg, and that completely cleaned up my squats and my deadlifts. And that's happened for quite a few of my clients. Just cleaning up that right side stance leg is really truly beneficial to a lot of your bilateral exercises. All right. So once again, if you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. Check me out on Instagram @mejorstrength, and I'll see all of you next week. Bye.